Hi there, guys. It's Archie and back for the ADHD Care podcast. I hope you're doing well today. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by Melissa Carter, who is the founder of The Happy Child, which is an organisation that's based here in the UK. They do offer life coaching for children and teenagers as well as parents. So I'm going to bring Melissa on virtually, and we're going to be discussing about her organisation in greater detail. So,
hello, Archie.
hello.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Melissa. Great to have you on our podcast today, and I was so excited to bring you on. I know, we spoke ages ago. I don't know if you remember, like years ago, when I just started
Absolutely.
ADHD Care, and I was,
Yep.
following everything that you do, and really admire all the work that you put in terms of supporting individuals that have neurodiverse conditions and parents as well. And I've actually signposted
Thank
quite a
you.
number of people to you as well over the years. So nice to finally have you on and coming on to our podcast and discussing all the amazing work that you do.
Thank you so much, Archie. I'm so thrilled to be here with you today and having this conversation. And so thrilled that ADHD Care has, supported and is supporting so many, children, young people, and families, with neurodiversity. It's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. Just to kickstart the conversation, do you mind telling us about yourself and about the Happy Child organisation?
Sure, sure. So the Happy Child has been up and running now for about 7 years, and I am a family life coach. So I work with children, young people, and parents. Supporting them in all sorts of aspects of day-to-day life. I tend to work a lot with neurodiversity these days, and I suppose my main purpose as a life coach is to enable parents to find that sense of ease that they're looking for, that sense of understanding what's going on with their child. I think, all parents really want, and I include myself in that, is a happy child.
Mm.
And so hence the name of my private practice. I get invited into schools, so I do some keynote talks. I'm going to do one in June about boundary setting, which I think a lot of parents,
Yeah.
sort
Yep.
of enjoy knowing more about.
Yeah.
And I run workshops for parents so that, like-minded people can come together, but also it's not just like-minded, it's sort of like life experience families can come together and
Yeah.
meet each other and chat and learn from each other about what works, what doesn't work, and sort of share
Yeah.
their stories. So yes, and that's the Happy Child. My
Yeah.
background is in play therapy and teaching. I was a head teacher for about 13 years and came out of the education system because I felt very strongly that I wanted to work on being able to support children and parents, really help them understand the education system. When you're in it and you're teaching, especially as a head, there are all sorts of aspects of ticking boxes, I suppose, to make
Yeah.
sure that children are achieving in a certain way. And yet emotional intelligence, as much as it is, these days, schools are really trying to support emotional well-being. I think that it's difficult in the classroom to really fully support children who have certain needs. And so I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to come out of education and, come into coaching, which I believe embraces both the kind of emotional well-being world and the learning world. And so I'm sort of the bridge between the two is the way that I like to think of it.
Yeah. What was it that inspired you to setting up the organisation?
I think that I realized that um, one of the things in education that you hear a lot is that parents want their children to be learning, they want them to be accessing their education, and they want them to be happy. And what really inspired me is that in order for a child to learn, first of all, they need to be comfortable. And in order for them to be comfortable, they have to feel connected. And in order for that connectedness to actually be robust, they need to have that sense of self-worth. And that sense of self-worth is really what I believe is happiness. And that sense of I can is also incredibly important. And I think for families, one of the reasons why sometimes we find it difficult to understand, why our children perhaps are not as connected as they can be, or don't have such a high sense of self-worth, is because maybe we don't recognize that in ourselves as parents. And so the happy child is called the happy child, not just for the, parents who would like to help their children become happier or find that calm or that connectedness. It's also about parents understanding that within all of us, we have an inner child, and that inner child is we've carried all of our lives, and we have to understand whether we're content, whether we have that sense of self-worth and that sense of peace with who we are, first of all, in order to then help our children. And that for me is essential. And that was my inspiration, really, was, to help people understand that happiness is something that is inside us, that is self-created, first of all, and then we can get out and about into the world and start, really, feeling that we can get on and do things.
On your website, you mentioned about the core idea behind the Happy Child is to help parents connect with the children's true selves. Do you mind just elaborating on that in terms of how this philosophy particularly supports children with ADHD?
Absolutely. I think that, whether it is ADHD or, within the realm of neurodiversity, because, of course, as you know more than anyone, Archie, we have all of these different sort of puzzle pieces, don't we, of the neurodiverse profile. And so, I think what's really important is, first of all, to help parents connect with the child's true sense, that authentic self. We have to understand about an ADHD profile, or a person's profile, a person's sensory profile, how they respond to every single sense that they have. But more importantly, we need parents to understand a child's true sense of who they are, like a scan almost, of their, what are their special interests, what can they do physically, what do they really enjoy, whether they have any kind of executive functioning that needs to be supported, all of that side of, emotions, that emotional intensity, that side of all of these different parts of the wheel, I suppose, of understanding a true self. I think it's really important for parents to understand who their child is, first of all, and then they can work on connecting, because quite often we have a kind of idea, of what a child maybe should be, what we hoped for our child to be, and yet a kid with ADHD, or a young person with ADHD, their presentation, their profile is quite often different, maybe, to expectation. And so we have to first of all look at that child for who they are, and acknowledge that child for who they are, to then help the parent connect.
I agree with you on that point 100%, because I think, certainly it's when I've spoken to parents, they sometimes, not all, but some struggle when they are faced with a child with neurodiverse needs, whereby it's the acceptance or understanding how this young person's brain works and how they function, how their world looks like, for you to actually then start to implement or make any changes going forward. So embracing, understanding, coming to peace with whatever the difficulties that young person have, and understanding that their brains are wired differently, is the whole concept of understanding neurodiversity, isn't it? Which is very crucial, which again, as parents, we all, I'm a parent as well, we all have these expectations. When a child comes, you expect them to, do well and to succeed in life, good health and all of this and that. Well, you're faced with certain challenges. that might not be physically like noticeable, hidden disabilities, in this case things like autism and ADHD and dyslexia and dyspraxia, which can make it difficult, certainly for anyone, let alone the parent, to to get their head around that and to understand how the young person's world operates.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that when I meet with parents and we have our initial conversations, I think the simplicity of breaking it down for them to, first of all, we need to, teach the child who they are and help them connect with all of those different parts of themselves, and to understand, this is tricky for you. And can you tell me how this is tricky for you? And really listen, and give them the time and space to share, what they enjoy and what is challenging for them. So, first of all, it's the child finding out who they are. And only then can we really help the parents understand who their child is through their child's words and through the way that their child perceives the world. The child then understanding, who am I to you? Because, of course, what we know about neurodiversity is that quite often children are quite confused at quite a young age because the world does not make sense. It does in their understanding, but actually in reality, once they get out and about into the world, and we're talking about school age children, then when they start going into reception in year one, that's when we start to really see that sometimes those struggles with who they are to themselves, and yet who am I to you? So who am I to you as a teacher? Who am I to you as my peer group? That's where we see those struggles really start to come through. And what I say to parents is that, in order to help them connect, first of all, we have to give the child or young person the time and space to find themselves and to help us understand what being who they are means.
And how does the young person know who they are? What's that process like? Also, you do life coaching for children as well.
Yes.
Do you mind just talking us through that whole process there? Because some parents might be listening to this and going, is it because of their age where we expect, okay, they're 10 now, they should know who they are, or how does it work?
Well, I think that, even a 10-year-old does know quite a lot about who they are, don't
Yeah.
they? Actually, how old are your kids?
Nearly 9, and the other one is 5.
Yeah. I bet the 5-year-old knows more about life than we do. I got a 16-year-old and a newly turned 13-year-old. So I have 2 teenagers in my house now. But it's interesting. That's a good question to ask. And what I'm going to say to you is that my coaching is, I suppose, different for each child and for each family, based on the fact that they're all individuals, aren't they, the children, and the young people. But there are some sort of similarities in what I'm helping them do. So how do I help them get to learn about who they are? Quite simply, by offering them very creative activities. My favorite one is actually, we do this no matter what age. I even do this with parents in a first session, where I have a marble run and I ask, and it can be put together. It's not plastic, it's made out of wood. So it's balanced and it stands and is held up by gravity and balance. And that gets built, which is a wonderful creative activity, and all sorts of, discoveries are made as to, how it can, be stable, I think is the right word to say there. And then the marble is then obviously put along the run and adjustments are made, and maybe changes and modifications are made. And I say to everybody, this is what I'd like you to do, but I'm not going to tell you why I've asked you to do it until after you've built your marble run and you're satisfied and you're pleased with your outcome. And so we do this. And then there are 2 things that I say after they've, had that time building and learning and being resilient and having to modify and having to adjust. I say, okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to imagine that the marble run is life and that you are the marble. What have you learnt today about how you roll through life. And of course, from 5-year-olds all the way through to parents, the answers are quite similar. The marble runs themselves are incredibly different. And I love it because it shows the individuality of everybody who comes to see me. But the answers to that question are quite similar, which are, well, you've got to try to build your marble run so that it's stable, but sometimes it's not stable. And there is sort of these ups and downs, or sometimes the pathway doesn't work. So you've got to adjust it. And I guess that's what life is like, isn't it? We come up against blocks. Sometimes we go quick, sometimes we go slow, sometimes we drop, sometimes we fall off, sometimes we get frustrated. And so all of these answers start coming back. And then the second question that I ask is this: what do you want? As the marble, what do you want? And they all say to just be able to roll along the track and enjoy it. And I say, yes. So what do you think that means about you? And they all say the same thing, which is that some of the things that are happening in my life are tricky, but I'm just going to learn how I can keep rolling. Yeah. So, that's an example of, an activity that we'll do, but the coaching that there is there and the learning that there is vast. And so from that one session, they will go away and I will ask them to observe when things have become difficult, when they might have to have made adjustments, when they might have to modify things. And for the children and the young people who come to see me, I will ask them to share that with their parents, and to have a discussion about that so that the parents can also say, yeah, actually, that is really interesting, isn't it? Because all we want to do is really find the smoothest path to help ourselves. And yet we know the reality is that we have to be mindful that we will have to make adjustments and that there will be, blocks and there will be things that hinder us. And we just have to try. Can we rebuild? Can we refocus? Can we, do something to change this? And so that's problem solving, isn't it? And critical thinking.
Yeah.
And in an activity like that, when you're asking a child to problem solve or critically think and, find other ways, they're getting to know themselves. And that's, wonderful because they are able to see and share that visual learning and that practical activity and make that connection with themselves. And quite often, children will say and young people will say, this is what I find really difficult. I find it difficult when I can't find another way. I get frustrated or I shout or I tantrum.
Yeah. It's fascinating because I'm just trying to work out if it's a 5-year-old you're working with in terms of their not emotional, but their verbal literacy to be able to articulate themselves. It might be quite limited at that age. So you adapt it, wouldn't you, for that age group, wouldn't you? So you might think of a character name and then you see how they can use that to apply to their situations that they've encountered.
Absolutely.
And all of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So behind me here, you can see I have one of my worry monsters. So it might be with a 5-year-old that, I ask them to draw their worry. What would would their worry be like a monster or would it be like another creature, and what color would it be? And, if that creature could talk, what would it say and what colors would it be? And what does it want? What does that, that creature need to feel better, to be helped, to be understood? And quite often, younger children respond very well to that side of, being creative as a coach. So there's that therapeutic way of working with a child, as well as that sort of teaching of the skill, I wonder how that monster or creature could ask. What could that creature or monster say, And again, working with parents, I share that and I will say, this is one of the things that came up in the session today. And this is how you can, acknowledge this. This is what you could say to their teacher. This is how you can help them.
Yeah. Speaking of parents, what are some of the common misconceptions or challenges that you see in parents when they first approach you for help with their neurodiverse children?
What are some of the misconceptions, did you say,
Yeah, yeah,
Archie?
yeah. Misconceptions or challenges.
Mm. Mm. I think one of the sort of main questions that I get asked is, are they going to be okay? And I think that that's, again, if we say, misconception, it's, that there is something wrong. And I think it's about not knowing. I think it's about, not understanding and not having all of the information. So I get parents referred to me by child psychiatrists, for example, and yourself, where first of all, I help them understand what neurodiversity is and what that means. And so we talked earlier, you mentioned, neuroscience. And so I do a lot of dissemination, I suppose, asking them what they know, asking them what they don't know, and filling in the gaps. Because quite often the misconceptions are that their child is not going to be able to excel in school, that possibly they are going to have a disability, which is going to hold them back from life, and future. They are mainly quite scared and fearful. A lot of frustrated because of their child's behavior, specifically when there's ADHD around, and the boundaries are not really robust, and or fair. Um, so a lot of the misconceptions and misunderstandings actually come from not knowing, really.
Mm.
And I wonder whether that's what you find as
Yeah,
well.
honestly, like I think because we work in this field, sometimes sometimes we have to pause and think about where some of these parents might be coming from. It's a completely different field for them. As you go back to the expectations that we were discussing at the start, where you are, you had your own expectations about the child that you're going to have, and they're going to grow up
Yeah,
to be this, that, and the other. And the next thing along the way, you started to see all these difficulties and challenges, and subsequently, some of them then eventually go and have an assessment and then diagnosed with a neurodiverse condition. So it's a journey for some parents
yeah,
where they'll struggle with that journey. There's denial, there's struggling with acceptance, there is their wishes, they feel like, I don't know, there was something wrong with them, or maybe I
yeah,
could have done
yeah,
this, maybe I could have done that.
absolutely.
You have all of that, and it's all, they're all valid emotions and
Yeah,
questions to ask. And
absolutely.
yeah, and sometimes parents just need time and space to be given that opportunity to just vent whatever worries, concerns that they
Yes.
have before you actually even go down the route of, okay, this is what we need to do and stuff like that.
Absolutely, exactly. I really value the work of Linda Murphy, who wrote about declarative language, and co-regulation. There's so many different people, that and practitioners and experts around the world. And for each parent, I often find that there's a little bit of a patchwork quilt that we can put together, to help them understand what it is that they need to know, first of all, to help soothe their concerns and their worries. And I believe it's absolutely fundamental to teach them about neuroscience, neuropsychology, and how the brain works, so that they can understand that there is nothing wrong with their child, that actually this is about the brain being wired differently. But
Yeah.
even then, I struggle with if when I put on my parenting hat, and I hear sometimes the way that we speak about the brain being wired differently, I think to myself, even as a parent, that just it just gives you that little bit of a feeling of, isn't that wrong? Is
Yep.
shouldn't our brains all be wired the same as
Yep.
well? So it's really curious for me, actually, to spend time. The more I work in this field, the more I learn. The more my own growth mindset and my own brain is racking up many connections because of the people that I'm so fortunate to spend time with. But I think that understanding how the brain works, specifically when we can look at why a child, for example, might move from, being calm and regulated to, hypo-arousal, where they are cut off and withdrawn and not able to communicate and not able to connect to task. Or they then dysregulate to hyper-arousal, where they, are more like a little volcano exploding with lots of shouting or tantrums or very difficult behavior. Parents don't understand why that's happening. And so we have to teach them about how, the different parts of the brain are, trying to help and trying to communicate with each other, and what's missing, and I think that that's fundamentally is so important, is to start with, this is what is going on. This is what's happening inside your child's brain, inside your, and this is what is going to help you the most, and understanding, well, these days there's a lot of talk about executive functioning skills and how we, have to support those skills. And of course it's so important. But your everyday parent, when you say, listen, your child's executive functioning skills need to be supported, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Right? So we have to start with helping parents understand what all of this language around neurodiversity means.
Yeah.
And help the child understand. You can't turn around to a child, and say, listen, we've got to work on your executive functioning skills. You as the, the professional have got to look at what their profile is, what they show you, and think of those activities that you can coach and skill them up with that is going to help their executive functioning,
Yeah. You advocate strongly for co-regulation. Do you mind just explaining to us what co-regulation involves and why it's so important, especially in the context of neurodiversity?
Sure. Well, we all know what self-regulation is. Self-regulation is that, we can look after the way that we think, and we can look after the way that we feel, and then we can give ourselves explanations for our different thoughts, and that we can identify and acknowledge the feelings that we're having, and understand that if we have a feeling in our tummy, a sensation in our tummy, that might mean that we're feeling excited, or it might be feeling nervous or apprehensive, that, we can make all of those connections, and we can look after ourselves, and we can manage that. So co-regulation is the understanding that for certain neurodiverse profiles, for certain children and young people, they find regulating themselves really hard, because their sensory profile is one where they might find noise and sound particularly difficult. They can't filter out all of the different sounds or noise that they might hear. For example, let's take the classroom. And because of that, that makes them feel anxious. And because that anxiety then increases because they can't regulate that, they're going to need somebody to help them, to be present and to be with them, to together regulate. So that means that when a child does get into overwhelm, that the parent or the adult who is looking after that child, teacher, for example, understands that they are in overwhelm, and understands that they're going to need time and space and some tools to help themselves to regulate. And that means acknowledging that they're finding something difficult, thinking about what might help them. Do they have, in my coaching bag, that I give to children, it's a sort of an emotional toolbox full of all different practical kind of everyday fiddly objects, or, something special for that child. Should they get something like that out of their bag? Should we do some breathing together? Practice some mindfulness, which I know gets a little bit poo-pooed, but actually, when children really understand what helps them, they just need to be helped to remember what helps them. And so the difference between self-regulation and co-regulation is essentially that a child is not being expected to regulate themselves as an individual, that there is an adult that is fully present with them, that is helping them manage the big feelings that they are having and helping them find a way of helping themselves. So practicing some autonomy, but with someone else present, which feels safe, which feels supported and which feels connected. And of course, you have safety and you have connection and you have support, you're going to start feeling much better quite quickly. But if you are left alone with these big feelings, it's highly unlikely that a child or a young person will be able to regulate. Hence why in the classroom, we see that schools are responding to children who need to, and young people who need to regulate, by giving them, a learning card or an exit pass so that they can, leave the classroom, go and do some breathing, get some space around them. And that's brilliant. But sometimes what we need to do is we need to have that co-regulation where we are together with the child. And a huge part of my coaching is teaching parents how to be present with those really challenging, very difficult moments.
Isn't it about just incorporating some of these strategies generally rather than being more reactive? Do you think it's worth being more proactive with it? So if it's
Absolutely.
engaging with meditation, breathing exercises, relaxation, teaching that on to the child before they go to school, then they get up, when they go into bed, rather than waiting for them to have the big feelings and start to then want to do the, whatever strategy you want to implement. Yeah.
Exactly. Absolutely. And I think that one of the things that I love and value about my role is that everything that I teach can be passed forward. And so the other day I had a wonderful email from a mum saying to me, this is a year after I've worked with her daughter, who is now at senior school. She had taken some photographs of some little cards that her daughter had written for her younger brother, who was, struggling with some anxiety and some challenges at school. And on those cards were written some of the ways that this little girl has learnt to help herself. And so she was helping her little brother co-regulate by actually giving him the tools and the skills that she had already learnt in her own coaching and passing that forward. And I think that that is just wonderful. And it's evidence of the fact that when a child or young person imbues and really takes in that learning, as you say, they go off and they share it, don't they? So I believe, Archie, and I am a huge advocate for this, that actually we need coaching in schools, and we need, we need children to work on all of these different techniques and have their emotional toolbox with all of their practical, whatever it is, resources that they need, but to understand that goes everywhere, with them. And the younger we start, the better. And quite honestly, the younger that you can start with a child who has a neurodiverse profile, the better, and what we need is we need to get better at identifying these sensory profiles, and we need to get better at helping parents understand when their child needs support. And we need nurseries and we need teachers to really be better trained in understanding neurodiverse profiles.
I agree. And I think sometimes, to be fair, parents, teachers, or any professionals, it's challenging to realise and recognise that there is an unmet need, or they're trying to communicate something there. If you are faced with a meltdown or behaviour, or their priority, particularly in a school setting, is they want to safeguard the young person themselves and others.
Yes.
So chances are they will turn to their behavioural policy rather than looking at, okay, there might be some, this young person has neurodiverse needs that might mean that they have some sensory issues, or they're struggling with feeling overwhelmed and anxious. They can't really express their emotions appropriately. So clearly, definitely, awareness training is needed there for parents and for teachers as well. But I suppose
Absolutely.
the teachers, they're faced with 30 students in a class. It is hard sometimes if you're faced with a young person who's calling out, constantly wanting to get up and throw things in the class. And
Yes. It's hard. It really is hard. I was in a school before, the Easter holidays, and, sitting with the head of, pastoral care and, and well-being in this, large secondary school. And I was there supporting my client who is in year 7, and yes, there's the calling out, and there's the needing to use the learning cards, and have those breaks, and this wonderful teacher in charge of so many kids looked at me and he said, Melissa, he said, we so appreciate everything and we acknowledge everything that you were saying that your client needs, and we are this is what we're doing. And I was amazed by the amount that they are doing and what they have in place. And they said, we need 5 of you just in this school. And I think that is it's such a hard thing for parents to understand and to appreciate. And I was thank you for reminding me. I really sat there thinking that I go in sometimes to offer support, and I'm asked to go in and give ideas and to support teachers, and I forget that the teachers are, it's not just one client that's there. They've got 5 other kids there. They've got 10 other children who have needs that are more than the children that I go in to help them with. And it's hard, Archie, isn't it? And haven't you been in education? I've been in education. It's a really hard place to be, to meet needs.
Yeah, and certainly the teacher training itself hardly touches neurodiversity, as we know.
Absolutely.
I think out of the whole, training, I think they only have like a few hours of it, if the most, which is quite sad given the prevalence of neurodiverse needs in young people in schools.
Absolutely. I think when I did my teacher training, Archie, I don't think that we even talked about neurodiversity. I don't think that was there. And that was, back in 2000 or something, so early 2000. It wasn't there.
Congratulations on your recent book publication. I can see the books behind you.
I know.
Sitting proudly on your bookshelf.
Product placement there. Absolutely. Yes, there it is. Magic happens in the unscrambled box.
Wow.
And this is wonderful. So this has been written by 3 of us, actually. Lisa Jennings, who has been a psychotherapist for a very long time. I think she's got over 60 years of experience clocked up in the field of mental health, and is an absolute superstar. We've got Gaynor Spitoni, who is a child psychologist trained at the Tavistock. And then there's me. And the 3 of us have come together to write this series of children's books for learning essentially about what you would put in your emotional toolbox, but we call it the unscramble box. So, when children have really big feelings, sometimes it's all scrambled up, isn't it? Sort of like a ball of wool that has been, all tangled up together. And what we have to do is help children to unwind and untangle and unscramble that ball of confusion, to look at each strand, to make sense of it, to problem solve, and to be able to move on. So the stories follow dragons who live in the mindful mountains. There are 2 dragons called Bella and Bean. And this particular book tells of a day where they became incredibly frustrated because something that they were looking forward to, they couldn't do. And so they have to learn how to manage those really big feelings and work through them. And at the back of the book, we have written a section for parents and for teachers so that they know essentially what language to use and how to support their children when reading this story, and how to connect, we say, with the warmth of their own goodness, which I think is something that is just fundamentally important for all of us. That warmth of our own goodness is really happiness, isn't it? Book is out now on Amazon, which is great. And yes, it's a wonderful story.
It's amazing. Just to say, I haven't received my signed, personalised copy from you yet.
It's coming, Archie. I wanted to bring it in, but it'll come. Don't you worry.
Yeah, of course. I'll look forward to receiving it.
Absolutely.
That's amazing. That's something that I was going to say. What we'll do is we'll add the link, where people can purchase the book, as you said, Amazon. I'll add that into the podcast description as well, for
Wonderful.
people to go and look out for that. So, and yeah, speaking of that book, so what do you hope to see happen when people purchase the book? What changes? What's your motivation behind this book? What is it that you want to see change?
I think the reason for writing the book is because there are so many children's books out there that really support getting, helping children understand their feelings. Yeah, I think on behind me on the shelf, you can see the color monsters. And I think the color monster that's been written for children, they are incredible. Um, and I think that the reason for writing this particular book is that we noticed that there are few books out there that actually give enough of a therapeutic journey for children and parents to be taken on, so that there is the acknowledgement of the feeling, that there is the understanding that the child needs to be able, and in this story, it's the dragons need to be able to sit with those big feelings and learn how to bear them. And from that, to find a way of moving on. And that feelings can change, and they're not permanent. Um, and what our reason for really putting all of that theory and understanding together in the stories is so that, again, I spoke about connection earlier, but it's to help the child learn more about who they are, learn what they can do, and it's to help the parent learn the process of acknowledgement, time and space, learning how to let children sit in that uncomfortable space, and learning that feelings can change, and life goes on. So we felt that there was a niche in the market, in the children's illustrated market, for putting that kind of therapeutic and problem solving journey into stories.
What age group is this catered for?
5 to 12-year-olds, and quite honestly, we've had all sorts of people read the book, and we're getting feedback from people who are obviously adults saying that I needed to understand this. I'm going to go and get my own unscrambled box together. Obviously, and it's one of those things. What we hope, us answering your question about what we hope that all children can read this book and get a non-scramble box together, and that they can make their own box and put inside it everything that makes them feel good. In this story, the dragons come across a blanket that they can wrap themselves in. They come across some bubbles that they can blow. They come across a journal that they can write in. And as you can hear, these are all practical resources that we have access to, but it's understanding why those resources are important. One of the things that I think is funny is when parents come into my rooms here, they often say, but that's just a toy, isn't it? And I say, well, yeah. I said that's one perspective, but another perspective is, how can we make good use of that toy? How can that toy be a resource? And all around us, it's so important that we have that creativity, and that understanding that whatever it is that helps us is just incredibly important, for
Yeah.
our own well-being.
Yeah, no, I'll look. I'll probably wait. I can't wait to get a copy of it. As I said, for me to read through it myself. To be fair, I can use that and read it to my kids as well. Are there any other sort of future projects that you are excited about that you want to share?
Yes, well, I'm writing my own happy child journal. I have been asked to write a book. And the thing with me, Archie, is that, and this is going to make you laugh, but I have an ADHD profile. And I'm incredibly creative, and I have lots of ideas scattered all over the place. And in order to be able to write a book, you have to pin me down and make sure that I am going to write what those chapters are, and get it all written down. But in the meantime, whilst I'm thinking of that book, I'm also working on the next book of the dragons, and I'm writing my own happy child journal. And so, as you can tell, I'm very passionate about what I do, but I have to make sure that my brain is, that I can catch up with it. So,
Yeah.
A couple of projects. I have a workshop on the 16th of May for parents who have children and, who have neurodiverse profiles. And they come and we, talk about everything that I've said, help them understand neurodiversity, help them understand their own profile, so that they can understand their child's profile. What does that mean? And I help them understand what an unscrambled box is and what they can put inside it to help themselves stay calm as parents. Because, as you well know, a dysregulated parent is, even with a regulated child, is going to create a dysregulated child. So, that workshop on the 16th, I believe, my workshops are, a huge sort of project that I'm consistently working on. But yes, that's that.
Yeah, on that point, actually, for our listeners who might be willing to attend the workshop itself, do you want to tell us a bit more about it, what time, where it is, how they can register?
Sure. Absolutely. Well, there's a link on my website, thehappychild.co.uk, and it's on the events page. For people in Surrey who know, it's near the little village of Chiddingfold, and the setting is a beautiful sort of glass house, so lots of space and natural light, which I think is really important when you're working with parents and with anybody really, because I believe that, outdoors, indoors, bringing them together is important. What we'll be it starts at 9:30 on Thursday the 16th. We work for 3 hours. We have a coffee and cake break. And what we work through are, what are executive functioning skills? What does that mean? We look at sensory profiles. So we look at how does your child, actually process everything that they see, everything that they hear, tastes, textures, sounds, all of that side of things. We look at what declarative language is, and we have a little practice at using declarative language rather than using the imperative all of the time. We talk about co-regulation, as you and I have done. We talk about all of the sort of aspects of mindfulness that there are, that they can, engage with and model for their children. And generally, we have a very good time, lots of laughter always, because I'm very informal. I think it's the way that forward for parents to feel comfortable in their own skin when they're with us. It's a wonderful opportunity to get together and learn.
Yeah.
So that's that.
So amazing, great workshops. It sounds like something that's very informative as well, and I'm sure some parents will benefit from that. Do you also work one-to-one with parents?
Yes, absolutely.
Support? Yeah.
Yes, I do. Parents are either referred to me by professionals such as yourself, or word of mouth. And yes, we have a bespoke sort of coaching program that we're put together for parents, and that depends on their child or the young person's age that they want to support. And quite often, when I have worked with a child or young person, parents sometimes keep attending sessions with me so that they can keep practicing and refining their parenting skills to better support their child. And I think what's important, Archie, for me to explain, for me, the difference between coaching and counselling and therapy is that coaching is my way of skilling a child and young person up so that they get to know who they are, get to know how they can help themselves be the best version of themselves that they are, to feel comfortable around other people. But to take that learning away and practice that with their families, it's not long-term work. And I think that that's what's really important. I'm not saying, there's something wrong with you. We have to spend time working on this. What I'm saying is, come to me, learn about who you are, enjoy being who you are, and now go out into the world and celebrate that. So it's shorter term work than a counselling or a therapy process, coaching in that way. And so parents, sometimes continue to come and see me after we've done a coaching program with their child, just so that they can refine and, and make sure that they know what they can keep doing.
Do you offer online sessions as well?
Yes, absolutely. So I do work on Zoom. I think that's one of the things that's, sort of stayed, isn't it, after the COVID lockdown
Yeah.
years. So yes, I work with parents on Zoom. It's easy that way, straightforward for, dad, and mum to jump into a meeting if they're in two different places. I can do evening sessions with parents as well. And I also see, parents face to face. All of my sessions with children and young people are currently face to face, because I believe that is absolutely fundamental in the work that we do, because I have a
Yeah.
lot of practical and creative resources that we use. So those take place in person, but parent sessions are mostly online, Archie.
Okay. What age group young people do you work with?
So I work with children aged 5, mainly through to 14, so year 8. However, I do work with young people up until the age of, 16, 17. And mainly those young people that I work with, I'm supporting them with anxieties related to the exam process and peer group social situations. Certainly with neurodiversity, those are the years of as they are with all adolescents, how do I fit in to my environment and to my belonging, and how and what does that feel like, and how do I feel comfortable, as the person that I am. So I do a lot of work around that 16, 17 age, really with neurodiverse profiles, helping them with their anxieties because of the pressures that there are,
Yeah.
because of our wonderful GCSE exam system and A levels, as well as, that peer group side of life.
Yeah. What would you say? Any sort of key piece of advice for our listeners who are parenting or teaching neurodiverse children?
I would say that there are 3 pieces of advice that I give parents. The first one is that you are enough. You are the parent that your child needs, and that there is nothing that you need to doubt about that. The second piece of advice that I give is that your child is enough, just as they are, and that there is nothing wrong, that there is everything right, in fact. And so, what we have to understand is that there's nothing wrong with you as a parent, and there's nothing wrong with you as a child. You're both absolutely enough. The third piece of advice is, because we know that you are enough, now we need to start believing that. Now we need to start working on connecting who you are as a parent with what your thoughts and beliefs are about being a parent. And we have to connect that with who your child is and how they are presenting in reality as the unique individual person that they are. So, 3 pieces of advice: believe in yourself, because you're just the right parent and you are enough. Your child is enough, and there is nothing wrong. There is everything right. And the third piece of advice is to find that connection, because that's all you need.
Sound advice, and I think that I can see that resonating with a lot of parents, and I'm sure it reaches far. That's Sometimes how you summed it up there. Sometimes you just have to understand that you are doing your best.
Yeah.
It's enough. Because as a parent, you have all these thoughts in your head, but you're faced with society that's making you feel that way as well.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think, somebody once said something very valuable to me, Archie, which is, when you're in a hole and somebody gives you a ladder, it would be foolish not to climb up the ladder. And I think quite often, as parents, we get so lost in the shoulds. I should have done this. I haven't done that. This is I'm not doing the best that I can, and we become very self-critical, and we put ourselves in that hole. So sometimes that ladder means that we have to ask for help, and that's absolutely fine. Sometimes it means that we might need to turn to somebody, with your expert skills to look at, is medication necessary, and that's okay, because that's another ladder. And it doesn't mean that it's forever. It means that it's there as a support. And so I think that it's so important to understand that we can get out of the hole if we look at that ladder and we climb up it. But it sometimes means that we have to do things that we weren't necessarily planning on. And that can be hard, but it's okay.
What I want to add to that, certainly if you are a parent with a child who's aged between 5 and 12, kind of the age that we're discussing, or up to 14 actually, sometimes things can seem to be like forever. This is never going to change. My child is just going to be like this. Certainly from what I see and what you obviously know as well, children grow up, their needs change, they become more, to some extent self-aware, they learn to cope with situations, they'll supersede your expectations, the things that you thought they were never going to do or be able to achieve this and move that, you'll be surprised when, if I think back to some of my young people that I've seen for the last 6-7 years, and I can see the progress that they've made, they've done well in the exams, which if you think back to 7-8 years ago, some people were looking at them going, they're not going to finish education, they're not going to get a good job, they're not going to have social friendships and all of this and that. So what you see now doesn't stay the same. It's acknowledging it, having that support around you, you understanding, embracing what you are, your child that you have, allowing you to be able to navigate and help them throughout their journey without it being seen as it's a personal attack on you having a child with neurodiverse needs.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because it's
exactly.
Yeah.
Going back to the marble run that I talked to you about at the beginning here.
Yeah.
Yes, it's about choosing to roll along that marble track of life, no matter what are the turns that we sometimes have to take, no matter what are the uphill battles that we have to do, that, as you say, what things are like now is not permanent, and it is, I completely agree with you, and it resonates really strongly with me. The young people and children that I have had the great fortune of working with, to see where they are now, is also, it's just wonderful. It's just wonderful, and so I agree, and absolutely.
And same goes to the young people themselves as well, if they might be listening to this, that you are worth, you are special, you are gifted, you can be who you want to be, because they could be looking at themselves based on everything that we're discussing, or day to day, their self-esteem has been knocked every time they do something. It's all the negative that everyone's focusing on without really looking at, look at all the other aspects that they have going, that, they're quite looking at their strengths as well. So,
absolutely.
we shouldn't lose sight of that.
It's wonderful. And that reflection, I think, is so important. And it reminds me of, one of the activities, that we do, is I give the child a handheld mirror that they can look at themselves in. This comes from the work of Louise Hay. What we find is that if we look at ourselves in a mirror and talk to ourselves and say, well, hello, me, I'm so proud of, what I managed to achieve today. I listened in class, or, I was able to chat with a friend. And we look at ourselves in our own eyes. We are validating what we are saying, and we are telling ourselves that goodness. And I think that self-validation is just so important. And so, all people, all backgrounds and cultures or whatever, neurodiverse or not, we can all benefit from looking at ourselves and saying, hello, me, every morning. I'm so proud of who I am. And at the end of the day, hello, me, what a great day. And this is what I tried to do. Or, oh, today was really difficult. But this is how I managed. And, I love it when I, hear stories, parents will say to me, they were sitting on their bed holding their mirror, Melissa, and they were saying, I did well. I'm good enough. And that's so important, isn't it? Yes, to anybody listening to this, look at yourself in the mirror and tell yourself that you are special. And, with that warmth of your own goodness.
Yeah, happiness comes from within. Starts with you.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
yeah, wise words. I like the three kind of words that you have on your website: statements, creativity, compassion, courage. And I think it captures everything that we've been discussing today, and the whole inner child concept as well, which is amazing. And I think it's true for anyone, let alone children, even adults as well. If you think about it, it applies to us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think you can see how that embracing that whole inner child in yourself, how that can propel you to be able to achieve, improve your self-esteem, and feel that you valued, your worth, your love.
Those three words, Archie: creativity, compassion, and courage. They come from the research of I can't remember their names off the top of my head, but it's to do with the understanding that we have three brains, or three masses of neural pathways. So obviously we have our cephalic brain, the one in our head that we all know about. And then there's all of the neural pathways that are, around our heart, in our chest area. And then all of the neural pathways that are around our gut. And how these three areas of major neural processing all communicate. And when sometimes they're not communicating, that's when we feel, out of balance, or we're not happy, or we're not able to retain or focus, or, calm, soothe, remain in that sort of window of tolerance, as Dan Siegel talks about. But when our cephalic brain, our brain in our head, is really comfortable and connecting all of the dots, then we say its highest expression, its highest power is creativity. When all of the neural pathways are, running really well around our heart, and we are understanding our feelings and understanding the sensations in our body, and all of the messages are quite clear, even if some of those messages are, I'm not feeling happy, or I'm feeling frustrated, or I have great joy. As long as that's running, then we say that we have compassion. The highest expression is compassion, because we are looking after ourselves with loving kindness, and we're able to offer loving kindness to other people. But it starts with ourselves. And around our gut area, our enteric neural pathways there, they are, when we say to have gut courage, that's that sense of I can get out and about in the world, and I can have a go. I can take that risk. And so those three highest expressions of these three sort of masses of neural messaging and understanding who we are and how we are who we are in the world, that's where those words come from. The interconnectedness.
Yeah. That caught my attention, certainly on your website, because that stands out when you put it up on there. So nice for you to break it down for us as well, for our listeners. Is there anything else you wanted to let us know or share with us before I let you go back to your busy schedule?
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for having me, Archie, and thank you so much for referring families through to me. And it's wonderful to actually have friends and colleagues who we can work together with and collaborate with, because obviously the more support that we're able to give families and children and young people, the better. So you.
No, absolutely, and my pleasure. And certainly, neurodiversity it's quite a niche area as well. And I think families like the fact that how connected we are in terms of, like, I can think of, okay, Melissa's over there. If I'm working with a young person who could benefit from your services, certainly from my past, I've done that. Absolutely. And I'll continue to do so. And likewise in your case as well. Because sometimes it can feel isolating for parents, where you are able to identify that your child might need A, B, C, D, but you're then not able to refer them on or suggest anyone that they can reach out to. So I think certainly connectivity, working together, definitely is us as clinicians, professionals as a whole. I think I definitely encourage and promote that. So yeah,
wonderful. That's wonderful.
That continue.
Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa, for sharing your time and coming onto our special episode today. And for our listeners, certainly what we do is we'll add all your podcast, your website details, including the link for where they can purchase your book, on our podcast description. Do you have any social media? Are you on social media at all, like on Instagram or Facebook? Yep.
I'm on all of them. I'm on Instagram, I'm on X, and I am on Facebook and LinkedIn, actually. So they'll find me everywhere under The Happy Child.
Also, just search for The Happy Child.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So there you go, listeners. That was Melissa Carter from The Happy Child. And yeah, I look forward to bringing you on at some point as well in the future, because it'd be good to have a sit down with you. Maybe we can do that in person next time.
Brilliant. Thank
Perfect.
you, Archie.
Excellent. Nice to see you.
See
All the
you.
best. Take care.
Thank you.